This is the experience I had with a man named Songsak. He showed up at our house in Sao on the Christmas Eve morning of 1984. And he was out at the gate and rang the buzzer. And our lady that worked for us went out to check on it and see who it was. And she came in. I was just eating breakfast. I'd had a pretty bad night of headaches and my head was still hurting. I had my shorts on, my headband, and she said, John, there's a stranger out there that wants to talk to you. So I went out to the gate and he asked me if I was John Sachuot, as they called it. I said yes, and he said, well, I need to talk to you. I need some help or some advice and direction. And I said, well, I'm just eating breakfast right now and I'm not feeling very well. So how about me? Can I come by your house this afternoon? And I asked him where he lived. It was just around, probably about 4 blocks away, close to the train station there. And so he agreed to that. And I didn't invite him in. I really didn't know him. And I didn't feel like I could do much right then in talking to anybody. I went to his house and he had made a little table and a couple of chairs out of some packing crates. And his wife brought us in some coffee. And then she sat down beside his chair, just listening. And I asked him what he needed to ask me about. And he said, well, John, he said, I had this dream last night. And he said, I've been having some hard times financially. And he went into his backstory about having worked in Saudi Arabia and made some money and came back. He was born and grew up in Sao province, but in later years he was living up north. So he had spent his money on houses and cars and things, and then he got invested in a road building project with a friend of his. Turned out good, and so a little bit later the friend suggested they get in on this other deal on a longer stretch of road. So he went in with him on it, but when the payoff came, this so-called friend absconded with all the money, and Songsak was left with all the debts. And he said that he was just overcome with hatred toward this man. It just consumed him in his thoughts, and almost all the time that he just thought about it. Well, he had to earn a little money, so he was earning money by growing little tea plants and breaking off the leaves and making packaging them and selling them for $3. That was like 15 cents a box from house to house. But he said at the same time they were moving around the country. He was looking for this fellow that had stolen his money. And he came to Sao. He said the fellow was a relative of the governor. And he sat in a little coffee shop near the little street that went into the governor's mansion. They sat there quite often and had his hat down over his eyes where he could see, and had his gun in his back of his pants and covered up by his shirt tail. And he told his wife that every morning when he left home, she made a little cupcake-like canome and sold it to the students on the sidewalk to help their income too. But he told her that he might never get home again. Said, if I see him first, I'm going to kill him. And he said, I'll be executed for that. He said, if he sees me first, he'll probably kill me because he knows I'm after him. So she lived with that dread all during that time. For several months this went on. And he said that after a while, by this time, that before he had this experience, he had gotten to where he wanted to just forget about it and let that hatred go. He was just wearing him out, and he just wanted to be able to forget about it and but he said he couldn't turn loose of it. He just couldn't find a way to do it. And so he was thinking about that and had been most every night for a while. So the night before he came to the house, he said he had this dream. And in the dream, there was a tall white man with a large black book, which at that time, our Thai Bible was a fairly large book. And we only had the one version, which of course made it simpler. But he said in the dream, the tall white man pointed to the book, and he said, "Ni bin tang ti tu, zong bai nai tang ni." In English, it meant, this is the way to go. You must walk in this way. And he said, I woke up, I told my wife about the dream, and he said, do you think that means anything? And, well, she, like most Thais, they have quite a bit of interest and confidence in dreams. And she said, well, I don't know, but said, you probably want to go find that white man and talk to him. Or find a white man. I don't remember exactly how she worded it. So he said he got up and started asking questions around town. Now, we lived in, by that time, our city was about 40,000 people, but we were the only white family there. And so different people said, well, we've seen him, this white man, but a tall white man, but he said, we don't know where he lives. So he went to the police station where we had to register every year. And the lady who knew us from that, she told him, she said, we're not allowed to give out that information. And, well, this was, like I said, it was Christmas Eve, so it was getting close to New Year's, which is a traditional time for Thai folks to give gifts. And he said, well, I have a gift for Ajahn Stewart, said, and I'd like to take it to him, but I don't know where to find him. And so she finally relented and gave him our address and location. So that's how he got to the house. Well, I asked him when he said he needed help in finding the right way to go. I asked him, did he want to know the way to get rich or to get popular or to get famous or what kind of way he was thinking about. And that's really when he told me his backstory about how he was just wanting to find a way to get some relief from this hatred that he had. And so that's when I had a chance to start witnessing to him. And I was there several hours that first night, but I had taken one of the books that I had written sometime earlier on how to be a Christian and gave him a copy of that. And I asked him to read it, and the next day being Christmas, we had an invitation to eat with some friends in Bangkok, and I told him I would come back the day after. That would be 2 days from then, and if he had questions from the book, to write them down, and I'd try to answer them for him. So when I got back there, December 26th, he had a long piece of paper full of questions, both sides. The most interested person I really had run into in Thailand. And he was telling me how he liked the book and how it made sense to him. And so I started going to visit him and took him some other study sheets that he filled out, and I found out that he was pretty well educated. He'd had some law studies, and he had worked as in some government jobs in the past. And but his main worry and concern was, of course, he was still selling his tea leaves to get some money, but his concern was trying to get loose from that hatred that he had. So as we got to talking about it further, and his answers were good, and he began to understand. In fact, couple months later, after he had become a Christian, I was preaching at several different places on Sundays, but one Sunday morning the church asked him to, I don't know if they'd asked him to preach or if a question came up or something, but when I was talking to some of the members later, they said, did Songsak, where did he go to seminary? I said, oh, he hadn't been to seminary. They said, well, he knows a lot about the gospel. Said he seemed to really understand, you know. I don't think I told you that the other day, but that was a comment they made. Well, this kind of came to a head after several visits and back and forth, and at that time our car was in the shop, our mission car, having some work done, maintenance mostly. But so I'd been walking over to Songsak's house and back, of course, back home at night, and he would always walk me home at night. He said, I don't want anything to happen to you while you're visiting us. He said, that would be a big loss of face. He said, but I don't want you to get hurt either. I mean, he had a good sense of humor. Well, that one night we got to the front of our house and getting ready to go in the gate. And he had taken me right to the gate, and he said, John, he said, I really like all the things that I've read about and that you've been telling me. He said, it makes a lot of sense, and I think I want to follow these teachings. But he said, I can't quite understand it. He said, if I was on, he said, it's like I'm on the outside looking in. He said, I think if I was on the inside, that I would be able to understand it better. So I said, well, does that mean you're ready to accept Christ and become part of God's family and be on the inside? And he said, I think I am. And I said, well, tomorrow night, when I come to the house tomorrow evening, I said, we will focus our thoughts, you know, on discussion on how you actually accept Jesus, and we'll let you do that if you're ready. And I said, what about Pinpaka? That was his wife. She was a younger Thai lady, but like I said, she'd been sitting there listening intently to our conversation, and what he said just kind of threw me for a loop. But I knew that he had been a Thai boxer at one time, you know, the foot boxers in his younger days. But when I asked him about his wife, he said, John, he said, you'll have to ask her. He said, she's tasted my fist and my feet for the last time. Well, I got what he was saying. And later, in talking with her one time, she said, John, she said, it's so wonderful to have a new husband. The same guy, but he's a new person. The way he treats me with respect and love and kindness. And tears just flowed from her eyes as she was telling me that. She was really could see the difference in Songsak. Well, I talked to both of them that night, and they both prayed and asked the Lord to forgive them and put their faith in Him. And they came forward at church then the next Sunday, and we had a baptismal service for some of the young people not long after that, and they were baptized there in the church. We had a baptistry. This was a building that was built after that big fire that we had in '60. The church had been planning to build a building. They just were meeting in a little wooden kind of a shop building like when we made our early visits out there to Jackson South. So they had been saving their money, and the Foreign Mission Board helped them with funds to build a building, and they bought all the furniture and the inside fittings and so on. I think the building cost about $35,000. It was a 3-story building. Third floor was the pastorium for the pastor, and then we had, the second floor was our auditorium, and we had a balcony there. And the downstairs floor was for Sunday school classes or other meetings and funerals and suppers and things like that. And we had a flat roof on top where we could have socials, parties, and dinners up on top of the roof at night or daytime either. But anyhow, uh, I've lost my train of thought here. Forget about that part.
Baptism.
Oh yeah, yeah. We had our baptistry was under the pulpit. We had the floorboards and we could take those up and then we had curtains that we could string across on wires and have a dressing room for the men and the women. Uh, Now I had baptized a few people already out in the muddy little creek-like thing behind the church. There was a couple of folks that wanted to go ahead and be baptized and not wait for the church building to be finished. But anyhow, we did have the baptistry, and not long after that, I took Songsak with me to one of our bi-monthly pastors and leaders meetings, and this one was up in the area pretty close to Cambodia, and he got acquainted with a lot of good Christian friends there, and also with the Thai home missionary that worked up in that particular area up there to the eastern part of the country. And so they got their heads together, and Ajahn Udom, who's the home missionary, he invited him and Tiem Ta. I don't know. That's another lady. I forgot this lady's name now.
Dipika.
Pinpaka. Yeah, I think my old brain's getting kind of rusty. But anyhow, he went up. The two of them went up, I guess, on the bus, and Ajahn Udom, they stayed with them a few days, and he took Songsak around on his motorcycle to the different villages, and so they decided between them, I think they prayed about it together, and they decided to move up there. Well, by that time, we had some very, very poor farm people that were believers, and a couple of our missionaries and some members of a Chinese church in Bangkok that had a little more money, they leased a piece of land up there in the country and divided up into smaller plots where families could live and do some truck farming and earn some money. And they let them stay there with the long-term loan. And so Songsak and Pinpaga got one of those plots of land. And in a very short time, they had elected him as their village head man, Puyai Ban, they called him. And when the pastor passed away, an older man, they elected Songsak to be their pastor. And so they were living there when we retired. But just before we retired, well, Songsak had visited us several times, but he brought his little girl. They had a baby born after they moved up there, and her nickname was Ding, the sound of the bell. And she was about 4 years old by then. But he brought her to come and say goodbye to us as we were packing up, getting ready to retire. And I had a condition started in the early 80s, which it's called lymphedema now. The old name is elephantiasis. I had very big swollen up right leg, some blockage of the lymph vessels. But he brought Ding in. They were in the living room with us, and I was sitting in the rocking chair, and she came over and got right in front of me and put her hands on my swollen leg and prayed for me. And that was a pretty special time, as you can imagine. So I haven't been able to keep in real close touch with Songsak, I knew, I heard some of the things that happened. Uh, well, after he had gone to the Christian village, the Muban Christian, he got a job with a radio station up in that area, and he had a weekly, I think, broadcast of his own, a kind of a Christian gospel program. But after a while, it came up that when the annual fair time came around, where they had all the temple fairs, that the boss man expected all of them to go to these fairs and, of course, publicize their radio, but also participate in the Buddhist activities. And he told his boss that he was a Christian now, and he just couldn't do that. And so he lost that job. But he persevered, and the last time I heard, he was still, I think by that time maybe, no, he didn't have a motorcycle yet. I do remember one interesting experience. I was taking him home from one of our pastor's leadership schools one night. His village was about 6 miles, I guess, from the church, but it was, a very rural type road. But we were going down this bumpy dirt road in a van, no car, maybe a van, anyhow. All of a sudden he said, Ajahn, you, stop. And he got out and grabbed this big bullfrog out of the road. He said, oh, that'll be enough for our supper tomorrow. So he was making it the hard way, but he seemed very happy, and his wife certainly was. So we pray for them. And as I was telling Bob the other day, they divided that province where they were located into 2 parts, and the new provincial capital building was going to be built on some land that wasn't very far from this Christian village. And I feel like if any of our Christian leaders, who mostly the country leaders were not highly educated, as fine and dedicated as they were, but I feel like Songsak would be one of the ones that could talk to these government people because of his experience. And in fact, Maxine and I were up helping celebrate Christmas one year, and I think Songsak had brought some fellas with him that were government officials to that celebration. So we pray for him and pray that the Lord will use him in a great way. But that was an experience that, of course, I went back to the book of Acts, and I thought about how the Lord led missionaries, apostles to certain people, like the Ethiopian eunuch and the Roman centurion, people that the Christians didn't know anything about, but the Lord saw them. And Songsak has appreciated that of all the millions of people in the world, God had his eye on him. And there's a verse somewhere in the Psalms, I think, that the eyes of the Lord are in all the earth and seeing all the people. So he saw this man's heart and found a way to connect with a Christian person that could talk to him and tell him how to find a way.